ch1a replacement bride-to-be. Having recomposed herself from a fully agape mouth, she gasped, "What do you mean I must marry James?" Still attired in a long white lab coat, Emily Harper had just returned from attending college classes, when she was basically ambushed with word of the newly decided arrangement. Upon hearing the news, her heart instantly became disconcerted. She dropped all the textbooks she was carrying. This immediately caught her stepmother's attention. Deborah Harper lowered the spoon she was eating from, and momentarily gazed down upon the books that Emily had dropped on the floor. A frustrated expression overtook her countenance as she let out an exasperated huff. She spoke with an annoyed tone. "Tell me, was that done out of clumsiness, or are you throwing your attitude around? Honestly, it's an honor that the Walker family is willing to marry a member of the Harper family, so, you should be counting your blessings. Regardless of how you feel about it, you'll need to start packing up. You'll be heading off to the Walker household in just 3 days." At first, Emily was totally taken aback upon receiving the news, but after hearing her stepmother's harshly acerbic words, she had soon snapped out of the initial shock. She automatically bit down on her lip, while clenching her trembling hands, and glared towards the sofa at her stepsister. She had been eating porridge while displaying an indifferent expression on her face. Her father kept his nose buried in the newspaper. She fumed in her mind, "I've been married off without knowing anything about it. I don't understand, Dad. What's this all about?" Emily's disconcerted heart had turned stone cold, and she derisively sneered. "All because my step-sister betrayed James. You're expecting me to make up for it by marrying him. You all decided that I am to be the sacrificial lamb thrown into the fire pit, is that it?" Her father quickly ruffled the paper's pages a couple of times, as he ignored his daughter's questions, keeping his eyes averted down towards the newspaper while pretending not to hear her. James was the head of the Walker family, with a net worth of around $100 billion. All those in the upper echelon of Los Angeles were well aware of the fact that for nearly 3 years he was in a steady relationship with the younger daughter of the Harper family, Chloe. He was handsome and talented, while she was beautiful and affectionate, and they had planned on getting married a long time ago. However, all that had abruptly changed 3 months ago. James was involved in a car accident which left his lower body paralyzed and totally disfigured his face, transforming him into a crippled, vegetative, ugly monster. It was blatantly obvious to Emily that her sister's feelings for James had immediately diminished after the accident. Over the past 3 months she had only gone to the hospital twice, while spending most of her time with James's younger brother, Charlie. Repeatedly caught red-handed while out on the town by the paparazzi, it wasn't long before news of their illicit affair spread like wildfire. All throughout the upper echelon of Los Angeles, everyone gossiped over this scandalous topic, laughing at and mocking James. It wasn't bad enough that he had been disabled in the accident, but his beloved girlfriend had also abandoned him to hook up with his own brother. Talk about embarrassing. And not just for James, but for the Harper family as well, because everyone was also looking down on Chloe's shamefully heartless behavior of deserting her former beau after being crippled. In order to redeem themselves and save face, the Harper family wanted Emily to take her sister's place and marry James. After Emily's brief outburst, the sudden clashing of porcelain dishware smashing down heavily on the table resounded. In an elegant manner, Chloe daintily wiped the corners of her mouth with her napkin, and while a charmingly genteel smile emerged upon her exquisite face, her eyes flashed a contradictory, cold, standoffish gaze. "Betrayed him, you say? Emily, I'll have you know that James and I are just friends. It's always been Charlie who I truly loved. And he loves me. So stop speaking nonsense. It's fine, I suppose, if you want to talk trash here, for now, but once you marry into the Walker family, you'd better not speak that nonsense anymore if you know what's good for you. Deborah quickly concurred, that's right. You'd better heed your sister's advice. Then she tried justifying their deplorably selfish decision to have Emily marry James. Your father and I are doing this for your sake, we're arranging this marriage to make sure you end up with a good husband. And, once you and James are married, our ties with the Walker family will be even closer than before. Emily's shattering heart pounded in her chest, racing as quickly as her rapidly rising ire. A deluge of intense emotions began overwhelming her as all sorts of jumbled thoughts swirled through her mind. In a matter of seconds her face flushed, turning a dark, beet red shade from anger. Emily bitterly scoffed, "Doing this for my sake? Really? Is that so?" With disdain now seething in her heart, she rebukingly glared at her sister with piercing eyes. "From the moment you found out Yin Xian was horribly disfigured and would be disabled for life, you conveniently happened to fall in love with his younger brother, throwing me under the bus and making it necessary for our parents to force me to marry him in your place. Of all the conniving schemes, you've really outdone yourself this time." Chloe had always been extremely vain, and highly self-conscious about how people thought about or viewed her. Once her formerly talented and handsome boyfriend became disabled and disfigured, with a face now so horrid that it's said he could scare children into running away crying, it was no wonder she wound up cheating on him. Emily suddenly recalled a photo of James she saw in one of those tabloid magazines a few days ago, in which one of the paparazzi managed to candidly photograph him while lying unconscious on his hospital bed. To say that his face was a little disturbing would be an understatement. Devastatingly mangled from the car's explosion, his face was irrevocably damaged, with deep scarring, nerve and tissue damage. He had multiple skull and jaw fractures, and his eyebrows were permanently burned away with no chance of growing back. Just like his face, the rest of his body had also sustained heavy scarring and deep tissue burns. He appeared to be some sort of revolting monstrosity that even adults would either feel squeamish or fearful of if they saw him. "You have the audacity to speak as if you were piously righteous, selflessly thinking of what's in my best interest, when in truth you're only thinking of yourselves and how me marrying into the Walker family would benefit the Harper family." Emily's eyes darkened ever so slightly as she derisively glared at them. In the 5 years since her birth mother passed away, she rarely quarreled with these people. On those rare occasions when she did, her face never became so flushed that it turned any shade of red. Just because she didn't want to quarrel with them and avoided confrontation whenever she could, she was not just a pushover. In regard to the matter at hand, she was determined not to be controlled by the Harper family and was prepared to steadfastly refuse to give in to their wishes. Usually putting on a front to appear as an elegant, refined young woman with a gentle disposition, the Shadow Queen would make it a point to intentionally convey a calmly reserved and amicable expression. But after hearing Emily's accusations, which were actually more like facts, her countenance revealed her true self as her eyes exhibited a ruthlessly resolute gaze. "Emily, just who the hell do you think you are, talking about me like that? About our parents? Have you forgotten that the Harper family has graciously raised you for all these years without asking for anything in return?" That ruthlessly resolute stare had transformed into a maliciously malevolent glare, looking as if she wanted to tear Emily apart as she raised her voice. "Is this how you repay the Harper family? If that's the case, as far as I see you have no place in this house." Emily momentarily lost her composure, tightly closing her eyes as she briefly hyperventilated. After settling down and managing to compose herself, she immediately went on the defensive and retaliated. "Hey, and just exactly how much of a noble do you think you actually are? Perhaps you've forgotten, but back in the beginning, your mother was nothing more than my father's mistress. Once my mother passed away, this so-called family chiefly relied on living off of the property she left behind. And you have the audacity to stand there denouncing me to my face. You really are pathetic, you know that. I might have even felt a little sorry for you if I weren't so disgusted by you. Emily. Her father sharply bellowed as he finally put the newspaper aside. He reproachfully frowned at her. Is that really how you should be talking to a sister? And your older sister at that? She had long given up on her father since learning that he had a mistress, which in her eyes was totally disrespectful towards her mother. She stood there with a stoic expression and indifference in her eyes before just simply rolling her eyes at him. He went on, and what exactly is your problem anyway? The Walker family is one of the most prominent and wealthiest families in all of Los Angeles. Heiresses and socialites would line up for miles just to have a chance to be in their presence. But, here you are, an impudent girl who, for God only knows why, somehow feels wronged by having to marry James and become the wife of one of the most eligible bachelors in all of high society. Emily almost burst out into an uproarious laughter after hearing that, nearly biting off her tongue while trying to keep from laughing in his face. Dad, do you really think that I'm actually that stupid? Do you honestly take me for a fool or what? If James is really as wonderful as you claim him to be, then why didn't Chloe marry him while she had the chance? She was with one of the most eligible bachelors for 3 years, yet after being with Charlie for only 3 months, it's true love. Seriously, Dad, who are you trying to lie to? Emily glanced over at her sister and impishly grinned while flippantly quipping, or is Chloe actually that stupid? Chloe abruptly jumped to her feet and tightly pursed her lips. A melancholic visage suddenly overtook her. Then she slowly raised her hand and ominously pointed at Emily almost as if she was warning her. Who I choose to be with is no concern of yours, so shut your mouth. What you need to focus on now is becoming James Walker's wife. Because if you don't, well, then don't go blaming me for being impolite. Right after that, an unnerving silence befell the room and a mounting tension permeated the air. Her father so badly wanted to scold her for her insolence, but reluctantly refrained from saying anything. Truth was, he reminded himself that Emily was supposed to be marrying into the Walker family soon and he would need her help in dealing with them. Essentially, she would soon be the liaison between the Walker and Harper families. Deborah, on the other hand, wasn't looking that far down the road and was only brooding about their present conversation. With an evident touch of resentment in her tone, she scornfully chided her stepdaughter. Is it really necessary for you to look down on us? Especially since it's already hard enough as it is for us to fix you up with such a wealthy family to marry into, allowing you to enjoy a happy life. I suggest you check that attitude of yours, young lady, and be more gracious in accepting this marriage arrangement. Because if you refuse us this time, next time an offer of marriage comes around you might not be so fortunate. Opportunities like this don't present themselves that often. Once again, Emily had to keep from bursting out laughing. She couldn't believe it. Was Deborah actually trying to threaten her? She impishly smirked while saucily retorting, did you really think that by trying to criticize me, and in such a poor attempt at that, I might add, I'd cave in and submit to your request? Don't bother wasting your breath trying to spew your dogmatic rhetoric on me. Unlike some of us here, I don't want to easily give in and sell my dignity for the sake of wealth and status. Especially if it means becoming someone's kept woman or mistress. Whoever I eventually end up marrying will have nothing to do with you. Deborah was momentarily taken aback. She was chastised by Emily in such a berating manner that she could barely contain her disdain for her nemesis's daughter. She childishly stomped her feet, then brusquely crossed her arms across her chest while expelling an exaggeratedly exasperated huff, finishing with a disgruntled, humph. Deborah then looked over at her husband and scowled. Still feeling somewhat ashamed over his betraying infidelity to his deceased ex-wife, he always had a difficult time facing Emily. But Deborah had just been, in his opinion, disrespectfully berated by Emily, and as her husband, not to mention his yearning desire to prove his manliness in front of his wife and daughters, he decided not to care any more about sparing Emily's feelings. He immediately sprung up from the couch and rushed over to her. He firmly grasped her arm and forcefully dragged her to her room, then roughly shoved her in and locked the door. He loudly shouted through the door in his most authoritative tone, "You insensibly little brat. How dare you? You'll stay in that room and think long and hard about it. Whether you agree to marry James or not, if I say that you'll marry him, then you will. And if you don't agree with it and insist on refusing to marry him, then don't you even think about leaving that room."